An inspiring discovery, the hidden tattoo on a veteran janitor's neck that transformed everything. Peter stared at the floor tiles of Lincoln High, his mop gliding over the surface with an almost mechanical precision. A wave of nostalgia washed over him with each sweep, memories of the past flooding back like ink on the pages of a tattered book. He had long since perfected the art of remaining invisible, lurking in the shadows of a place alive with laughter and rebellion, yet he felt perpetually disconnected. Behind his grizzled face, an ocean of grief churned within him since his wife's sudden passing. Her absence gnawed at the fabric of his every day, the rhythms of their home echoing with her memories as though she were still alive. How could he reach his daughter Emma when he felt so lost himself? The teenage girl wore her grief like an armor, deflecting his attempts to connect. Today had been particularly rough for Emma. He sensed it in the shortness of her answers and the way she slumped at the dinner table. Yet he had his own aches as memories from Vietnam prowled through his mind like a bad ghost story, and the tattoo on his neck felt like a branded ticket to that past he was desperate to forget. In the fluorescent flicker of the school days, he pushed deep, locked away with his mop and bucket. As Peter cleaned, he noted the chatter of students, oblivious to his presence. A flash of ink caught Emma's eye earlier in the day, but he brushed it off as just the remnants of his battle with indifference. He settled into his rhythm, but shame curled around his heart like a snake. He had no answers, only the urge to keep the past buried. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The walls of the school remained a refuge for him, yet as everyday routines morphed into a facade of normalcy, the whispers of Emma's classmates gnawed at his consciousness. Hero. Veteran. Underdog. As they spoke of him, each word twisted like a knife, forcing him to confront the tension that simmered beneath his stoic surface. Recognition felt foreign and unwelcome, arousing feelings of unworthiness. What could he possibly share? Emma's fingers danced over her phone late into the evening, researching her father's forgotten chapters, piecing together a narrative he had tried so hard to erase. But every page turned only pushed him deeper into self-doubt, the shadows of his past deepening in his mind's eye. If she only knew the truth, would she still look up to him? Fear surged, a longing for her approval battling against the urge to push her away, to shield her from the pain he had endured. As thoughts circled like vultures, he shivered at the thought of being recognized, of stepping into the light. What would it mean? Peter stood frozen at the threshold of his own thoughts, an unresolved chaos dancing on the edge of his heart. Could he share that ink-lined secret on his neck, or would it just fracture the bond they had left? Not even he could bear to confront the real question: could he allow anyone, even Emma, to truly see him? The morning sun filtered through the narrow windows of Lincoln High, casting elongated shadows on the polished floor. Though routine was a comfort, Peter felt increasingly uneasy as each day unraveled. As he labored with his mop, he caught glimpses of students laughing, their carefree spirits clashing against his burdened heart. Exhaustion tugged at him, not just from the physicality of work, but from the emotional weight pressing down like a heavy cloak. Waking up had become an act of will. After Emma's stirrings in the night, answers for her unyielding questions about the past echoing through his sleep, Peter faced the day armed only with the ghostly remnants of her mother's love. The memories resonated deeply, fighting against the shallow moments of connection he forged with Emma. Each attempt to bridge the growing chasm felt more like a misstep, landing him further from her than he could bear. Lunchtime broke the school's monotony. Peter pushed open the cafeteria door, the cacophony of voices washing over him like a wave. There, amidst the clamor, he spotted Emma, her demeanor starkly contrasted with her peers. While laughter erupted around her, she remained disconnected, eyes glued to her phone, scrolling through digital windows of life, or perhaps peeking into his past. Her sadness loomed like a shadow, quietly spreading over her features. Peter wanted to reach out, but the fear of rejection paralyzed him. After lunch, he found himself pausing in a quiet hallway, the air thick with the scent of chalk dust and old books. In this moment of solitude, he closed his eyes, wrestling with the decision that weighed heavily on his soul. Could he approach Emma and offer a fragment of his truth? Could he risk revealing the tattoo, a testament of survival and sacrifice, yet a reminder of haunting memories? Perhaps he could share his experiences, not for glory but for understanding. The thought ignited a flicker of courage within him. The tattoo, hidden beneath years of resignation, began to feel less like a scar and more like a badge he could wear. That evening, as they sat in silence, Peter's resolve fractured the barrier between them. "Emma," he began, his voice a whisper, "there's something I haven't told you, something from my past that shapes who I am." The words hung there, heavy and charged. Emma glanced up, her defenses momentarily crumbling. "What do you mean, Dad?" He hesitated, the tattoo's implications crashing over him. Memories from Vietnam surged, vividly visceral, threatening to break apart the fragile moment they had constructed. "About the tattoo, it represents everything I tried to hide," he pressed, uncertainty creeping back in. The tugging tension between wanting to protect her and needing to reveal the truth clawed at him. She looked at him inquisitively, the walls of her own grief starting to crack. "You've never talked about it," she responded, her curiosity merging with vulnerability. Peter could almost see the possibilities unfold before them, a chance to renew connection, to build a bridge amidst the wreckage of their shared heartache. But dread clouded his thoughts. What if sharing shattered her perception of him even further? Preparing to peel back layers of his troubled past, he felt the burden of his choices weighing heavier than ever. The process of revealing his truth was riddled with uncertainty, a dance between vulnerability and the innate desire to reclaim his lost self. As he opened his mouth to speak, desperate to break the silence, a sharp knock echoed through the house, interrupting. The moment fell apart, and he realized he might never get another chance like this. The world beyond their quiet home beckoned, filled with challenges that dared to define Peter anew. He could leave his past buried or embrace it, confronting the ghosts that had long haunted him. The question remained what awaited him at the door, and would he have the courage to confront it? Peter took a deep breath and opened the door, the sharp winter air rushing into the warmth of his home. A figure stood silhouetted against the fading light, awkwardly clutching a stack of papers and a reluctant smile. It was Mr. Harris, the school principal, whose usually jovial demeanor seemed edged with an unease that made Peter's heart race. "Evening, Peter," Mr. Harris said, his voice failing to hide the weight of unspoken words. "Can I come in for a moment?" Peter stepped back, muscles tensing as he invited Mr. Harris into their home, a space that had transformed from sanctuary into a battlefield of emotions. Emma stood, her curiosity piqued, glancing from Peter to the principal. "Is everything all right?" she asked, her voice shaky. "Everything's fine, Emma," Peter replied, though the uncertainty hung in his chest like a heavy stone. He led Mr. Harris to the modest living room where moments ago, he had contemplated sharing his deeper truth with Emma. "Peter, I won't beat around the bush," Mr. Harris began, shifting in his seat. "Your work at the school, it's exemplary. The kids, they notice. They really do. But there's something more urgent at hand." The principal unfolded the stack of papers, revealing them to Peter. His heart sank as he recognized the names listed, students who struggled, some who even dropped out. "We're seeing a sharp rise in students refusing to attend. It's impacting their education, and I believe it's tied to something larger." "Larger?" Peter echoed, a mix of concern and disbelief threading through him. "Rumor has it a couple of students have started discussing your past. Some even think there's a connection to what they're feeling," Mr. Harris said, his eyes fixed on Peter's. "I need your help, Peter. I believe if you shared your experiences, your realities, it might inspire them to open up. You've got a powerful story that could connect with them." A mix of fear and disbelief washed over Peter. "You want me to become a story for them? To share something I've spent years trying to forget?" Yes. I know it's a lot. But your journey from where you've been to how you stand now, it has the potential to resonate deeply. It's worth it, Mr. Harris replied, his voice steady. Peter's pulse quickened as he considered the request, realizing value could emerge from vulnerability. He could leverage the storm of his past, his tattoo, his scars, to create a ripple effect of change. Yet the specter of his memories loomed large, an intimidating adversary. I need to think about it, he finally stated, his voice low. Mr. Harris nodded, respectful of Peter's hesitation. Take your time. But discuss it with Emma. I know she wants to understand. You might find strength you didn't know you had, together. As Mr. Harris departed, Peter felt a strange mixture of urgency and trepidation. They had once been swallowed by silence, trapped in their own grief. Now the prospect of sharing his past expanded the possibility, perhaps inviting Emma in rather than shielding her from the truth. Dad? Emma spoke, her voice cutting through the tension in the air. What did he mean by your past? He met her gaze, the weight of the moment lifting as understanding flickered between them, the connection shimmering in the distance, fragile yet beautiful. I think I need to tell you everything, he said, his resolve solidifying. Emma's eyes widened, a spark of hope flickering amidst her doubts. Can you do that? She asked softly, stepping closer. Yes, Peter affirmed, feeling an unexpected surge of courage. Not just for you, but for both of us. The challenges of reaching out loomed ahead, but suddenly, the walls of his past felt less like a prison and more like a journey they could share. With determination surging, he realized he had two battles to fight, that against his own fears, and another to help those students who looked at him as an example of resilience. But the pivotal question remained, would sharing his truth truly paint a brighter future for both him and Emma, or would it unleash a storm they weren't ready to face? As the snow began to swirl gently outside, Peter felt the weight of his decision settle heavily on his shoulders. The warmth of the living room contrasted sharply with the chill coursing through him. It was time for a shift. He needed to take action, but the question of how to share his story gnawed at him. Emma sensed his turmoil and sat beside him on the worn couch, her eyes filled with an innocence he found both comforting and heartbreaking. What are you thinking about? She asked, her voice small. About my past and how it has shaped me, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. It's like peeling back layers of an onion, and right now, I want to share everything with you. But it's not a simple story. It's filled with dark places, places I struggled to escape. Her nod encouraged him to continue. I haven't always been the man you see today. I've been lost, broken even. I had moments where I believed I was beyond saving, but something kept pushing me forward. That's the part one want to talk about, not just to help you understand, but to understand myself better, too. Emma's brow furrowed in contemplation. What if they laugh? What if they don't understand? His instinct was to reassure her, but he knew he had to be honest. That's a real possibility. But it's also possible that some kids might relate to my struggles. It could help them feel less alone. Suddenly, he remembered the tattoo one he had concealed for years, the inky etching that spoke volumes about his past struggles and the journey he had taken to find peace. He realized this wasn't just about opening up to Emma, it was a pivotal moment that beckoned him to confront his scars, literally and metaphorically. Emma, there's something I need to show you, Peter stated, his heart racing as he shifted forward on the couch. With a deep breath, he pulled his t-shirt slightly, revealing the intricate tattoo etched on his neck. It was a dark phoenix, wings extended upwards, a symbol of rebirth. Her eyes widened in awe, exotic with emotions she didn't yet understand. It's beautiful, she said softly, reaching out to trace the outline with her fingers. Does it mean something? It's a reminder, he affirmed, a lump forming in his throat. Of how I've risen from difficult times. It represents resilience. I want to show students that they can become more than their circumstances. But it isn't easy to share this. It forces me to confront parts of my history I've kept hidden. The warmth of Emma's hand on his skin sparked new courage within him. This was no longer just about him, it was about setting a precedent. If he could encourage her to face her fears, he could do the same. Peter felt the walls around him start to dissolve. Sharing his story could help others find hope, his own trials weaving a tapestry of possibility for those who felt hopeless. Yet another wave of dread washed over him, pulling at the edges of his resolve. "Do you think we're ready?" he asked, uncertainty threading through his words. "Together, we can be," Emma replied, a determined glint in her eyes. "You have to promise me something, Dad." "What's that?" "Promise me that you'll face it head-on, whatever comes next." "I promise," he stated, the sincerity in his voice echoing in the spacious room, and for the first time, he felt a flicker of optimism. As they sat together in that moment of vulnerability, Peter realized he hadn't just made a commitment to Emma. He had also made a commitment to himself. This journey would not only lead them closer together but could also pave way to healing others. But lurking within him was that old fear: what if rehashing these memories unleashed darkness he couldn't contain? Was he truly ready to face this story, or was he inviting a tempest into their lives? Peter leaned back against the couch, the promise he had just made to Emma lingering in the air like the last notes of a bittersweet melody. The warmth of the room now felt oppressive, a heavy blanket tightening around him. He had always held back from revealing too much, an instinct born from years of guarding his scars against curiosity and judgment. But the look in Emma's eyes, the simple trust that shone through, sparked something deep within him, a soft, insistent call that brushed back against his fears. That he realized this wasn't the moment to retreat into silence. Instead, he needed to confront his past in a raw, unfiltered way. He stood up suddenly, feeling the need to dissipate the heavy air that had settled between them. "Let's do this," he said, surprising himself with the conviction in his own voice. "Do what?" Emma asked, blinking up at him in confusion. "I mean, let's plan how to tell my story. I can't just sit here wondering anymore. If it means something to me, it could mean something to someone else too." A sense of determination pooled in his stomach, nudging aside the doubt that had so long held him back. Emma's eyes brightened. "Can we write it down? Like a script?" At that moment, he realized she wasn't just looking for reassurance, she was ready to help him dig deeper, to explore the facets of his identity he had long hidden in shadows. "Yes, a script sounds good," he replied, cheering at the idea. The thought of articulating his truth not in a general narrative but tailored to connect with kids like her shifted his anxiety into excitement. Over the next few days, Peter set aside time after work, determined to lay the foundation of what he wanted to share. Each evening reflected a battle between revisiting his memories and forging them into lessons. The stories flowed as he penned them down, fragmented recollections of struggles, moments of fleeting clarity, and transformations into the person he was today. Yet, as he wrote and rewrote, doubt seeped in. Would revisiting the anguish that had defined parts of his youth only give it more power? What if the students only saw the scars and not the phoenix who had risen from them? With each passing day, the winter outside mirrored his internal struggle. The snow piled high, gilding the world in white yet creating a sense of isolation. Peter wrestled with the balance of authenticity and exposure. He longed to inspire but was terrified of vulnerability and the inevitable judgments that could follow. Conversation with Emma became their ritual, brainstorming ways to frame his discoveries into relatable lessons. "Tell them how hard it was to get where you are, how it's not a straight path," she urged one evening, her youthful idealism shining through. "They might think life is just a fairy tale if you don't show them the hard parts." While Emma's guidance resonated deeply, his fears loomed larger. Each suggestion she made felt like a step into the unknown. What if someone in the audience would mock him? Or worse, what if they dismissed his story as a failed attempt to earn their sympathy? But beneath this paralyzing anxiety lay a burgeoning hope. Peter started to recognize the threat of his fears as less formidable than the potential of his words. With every draft and every conversation, he began to forge an unbreakable bond with his aching history, turning its heavy texture into something palpable, a weapon of hope rather than despair. As he completed his latest draft, a sense of satisfaction soothed his doubts momentarily. He sat back, absorbing the weight of his journey and all it carried. But then a new thought struck him: how would the students respond to his raw and unfiltered truth? With an increasing sense of urgency, he remained aware that the ultimate test loomed just ahead. "This is going to matter," he muttered to himself, fingers brushing against the tattoo that reminded him of everything he'd overcome. But what he didn't know was that unveiling this part of himself also meant risking an uncharted territory of rejection and judgment, and in this brewing storm of vulnerability, they realized the next battle was far from over. They would not only need to prepare his message but also face the critical question: how would they manage the fallout that could arise from such revelations? The moment Peter woke up the following morning, the sun was peeking through the curtains, but the warmth it offered did little to ease the chill creeping inside him. Today felt different. Today meant stepping beyond the safe cocoon he had carefully woven around himself. To share his truth was not merely to expose himself, but to strip away layers of silence that had served only to protect him. With that realization came a wave of anxiety, as though he was standing at the edge of a deep chasm, contemplating a leap. As he made his way to the school, each bump on the road served as a reminder of his impending leap. He replayed Emma's words in his head: show them the hard parts. The urgency of her encouragement ignited a mix of fear and adrenaline within him. What he didn't realize was how much he harnessed those two emotions. He shifted the narrative in his mind from one of self-doubt to one of determination. Arriving at the school, the familiar sounds of laughter and chaos filled the halls. It was the kind of energy that usually soothed him, yet today felt like a prelude to an impending storm. The conversations he had meticulously rehearsed played in his mind, yet they seemed to melt away under the weight of reality. He wandered into the faculty lounge, eyes drawn to Emma, who was already bubbling with excitement. "I brought a poster board," she exclaimed, nearly bouncing on her toes. That simple gesture anchored him momentarily. This was no longer just about him, it was about creating a connection, a potential bridge between his experience and the lives of those who might need to hear it. "Okay, let's do it," he said, trying to muster confidence despite the tremor in his voice. Together they spread out paper, markers, and snacks across a large table, the room filling with creativity amidst nervous energy. Emma's enthusiasm struck a chord, and slowly, as they designed a plan, Peter's apprehension began to dissipate. They brainstormed words, phrases, images, each piece a building block for his narrative. But even as the ideas flowed, another voice nagged at him, the voice of fear, constantly whispering doubts. Was he ready for this? How would his story resonate with students who lived in a world starkly different from his own? As they worked, Peter caught sight of his reflection in a nearby window. The man staring back carried his scars, but he also held the weight of resilience. Instinctively, he reached for the tattoo etched on his neck, the ink a permanent reminder of hardship, survival, and reclaiming his narrative. This small act grounded him, channeling the history of struggle into a resolve to move forward. The final notes of their preparation culminated with their mock presentation, and as Peter spoke, the fear that once loomed large seemed to diminish. Emma's eyes glinted with hope and encouragement, reminding him why he was doing this in the first place. Together, they envisioned the moment he would stand before the students, the moment when his past could light the way for others. But even as they prepared, Peter felt an inkling of resistance beginning to bubble beneath the surface. Would he truly be able to share the depths of his journey, to show the scars that time had not erased? What if the moment didn't go as he envisioned? Doubt turned into a challenge as Peter realized facing those fears was essential. He would need to navigate the complex waters of his emotional revelations. More than just a presentation, it was a window into understanding vulnerability both in himself and in the youth he hoped to impact. As their session wrapped up, Peter's heart raced with anticipation, mingling with the fear. What if this leap of faith granted him a chance to inspire? What if he emerged not just as a vessel of his story but as a symbol of resilience for those navigating their own shadows? The day of reckoning loomed closer, and as he glanced toward the hallway, he understood that sharing his truth wasn't the end game, it was merely the beginning. But as they prepared to head out, a sudden message from the principal sent a chill through him. A last-minute alteration to the assembly format could change everything. Would they be ready for this unanticipated twist? Would their message still resonate? Peter's heart quickened as he read the principal's message, the urgency of it penetrating the otherwise lively chatter of the faculty lounge. The details were vague, something about a different setup, more speakers plugged into the assembly agenda than anticipated. Anxiety surged within him, intertwining with the anticipation that had driven him all morning. Would his story still find its place amid the flurry of last-minute changes? He felt the warm, reassuring presence of Emma beside him as she read over his shoulder. "We'll adapt," she said, her voice steadying his tremors. The resilience she mirrored reassured him, yet he couldn't shake the fear that curled around every thought. Was he prepared to stand in front of students when the entire format had just shifted? "We'll just focus on our message," he replied, voice firmer than he felt. He settled into a structured mindset, running through possible scenarios. If the assembly would introduce his story differently, Peter knew he needed to refine the core of what he wanted to communicate. Sharing his truth meant shaping it into something that could stand alone, regardless of the context. The assembly hall loomed ahead, the giant doors now appearing more significant than ever. The walls pulsed with echoes of laughter and conversations, masking his internal storm. As they entered, Peter surveyed the space, taking in students milling about, reorienting themselves. Clusters stood chatting, unaware of the profound moment about to unfold. He and Emma walked to the side of the stage where they could rehearse. "Let us run through it one more time," he suggested, needing to bolster the falter of self-doubt that threatened to undermine him. As they rehearsed, Peter felt the gravity of his story shift. Initially, it had felt like a weight he was burdened with, but as he vocalized his truths, the energy transformed into something liberating. His narrative became a beacon. Every word he spoke felt less like a confession and more like an invitation, an open door for others to step inside. With each rehearsal, newfound details emerged, layers of his identity he hadn't previously understood fully. He willfully acknowledged moments he'd buried deep, instances of love lost, the sting of betrayal, the stark reality of isolation. There was something empowering about admitting to these struggles. They painted a more complex version of himself. "Your words are important, Peter. They need to know the truth is messy," Emma encouraged him, her eyes wide with belief. For the first time, he began to accept her insight. The complexities of his life weren't liabilities but his strength. Eventually, a voice crackled over the loudspeaker, calling for the assembly to start. Peter's stomach lurched. This was the moment he had prepared for, yet the unexpected changes still nagged in the back of his mind. As he and Emma stood behind the curtain waiting for their turn, he glimpsed past the crowd, spotting faces filled with anticipation. A mixture of excitement and dread battled within him. In that instant, he realized that this was no longer just about sharing his pain, this was his opportunity to redefine it. With a deep breath, Peter aligned his thoughts and refused to allow doubt to steal this moment. Sharing his story, a powerful exchange, held more significance than his immediate fears. But just as the assembly host called for Peter to step forward, a commotion erupted on the other side of the hall. Students began whispering, pointing toward the entrance. Narrowing his eyes, Peter caught sight of a figure shrouded in shadow, pacing toward the stage. Something about the presence struck a chord, a dissonance with the comfortable anticipation he'd felt seconds before. Who was this unexpected participant, and what did their presence mean for the fragile moment he was about to own? His stomach dropped. All the preparation, all the enlightenment he wrestled into his narrative, now felt precariously vulnerable. As uncertainty washed over him, he knew he was about to face not just the audience but perhaps an unforeseen challenge that could change everything. Peter's heart raced as he caught sight of the figure that disrupted the assembly's anticipation. The shadowy presence stepped into the light, revealing an older man with a weathered face, his eyes reflecting both wisdom and unease. A janitor's uniform adorned his frame, but it was the distinct tattoo peeking out from under his collar, a fierce lion, roaring, that drew Peter's gaze. what did this man represent, and why had he chosen this moment to break into the space that Peter had worked so hard to own? Peter's mind buzzed with possibilities. He felt a twinge of fear gnawing in his stomach, an insecurity creeping in as he glanced at Emma for support. Steeling himself, Peter turned his attention back to the stage, every ounce of bravado he had gathered now feeling more fragile than before. Here he was, ready to confront a room full of students with his truths. How could he share his story of growth and vulnerability when a stranger stood there, poised on the brink of change himself? The question gnawed at him: what if this man hijacked the moment he had so carefully crafted? As the janitor moved closer, Peter's uncertainty began to morph into curiosity. What did this man know? Maybe nestled within this unexpected disruption was an opportunity for revelation for both him and the audience. Could there be a lesson in the janitor's presence? The hostess' voice broke through the murmur in the hall. Please welcome Mr. James, the school's janitor, who has a few words to share. The students shifted, muttering among themselves. Eyes widened as they settled into new anticipation, prying their focus from Peter's looming address to the unexpected guest Mr. James cleared his throat, projecting a voice that vibrated with sincerity. I don't often speak in front of crowds, he began, a slight tremor in his hands revealing his own nervousness. But I want to remind you all of something: we all have stories, even those behind the scenes. He gestured to the janitorial staff, each person who contributed silently to the flow of the school's daily life. Being invisible doesn't diminish your worth, or your power to make change. Peter's internal dialogue spiraled. His story, which he had thought was a singular tale of personal struggle and triumph, was now intertwined with Mr. James's message. The older man's voice broke every self-doubt that ebbed and flowed within Peter. This unexpected appearance was a parallel, a mirror reflecting what Peter had prepared to share. With every word the janitor spoke, the students leaned in closer. I've had my share of battles, Mr. James continued, pulling at the collar of his shirt to reveal the tattoo fully. This lion is not just a symbol, it represents resilience and strength. It reminds me every day to rise above the challenges life throws my way. As Peter listened, his heart began to pulse with newfound energy. The connection was undeniable, stories of resilience linked them both. Perhaps, together, they would unpack something much larger than themselves. His focus shifted back to the reason he was here. Redefining pain into power wasn't just a personal journey but a universal call to embrace vulnerability. Suddenly, the assembly atmosphere felt charged with possibility. Peter realized he wasn't alone, rather, they were part of a much larger narrative, one involving every student in the room who had struggled, hidden their trauma, and fought to be acknowledged. This was a moment of collective awakening. When Mr. James finished, a wave of applause rippled through the hall. The applause thundered as Peter stood at the threshold of his own moment, staring into the growing sea of faces, now lit up with hope and understanding. He understood then that he had an important choice to make in how he would connect his message with theirs. Now, inspired by the unexpected disruption, Peter felt his earlier doubts transform into determination. With clarity of purpose, he stepped to the edge of the stage, ready to speak. But just before he could begin, a familiar face emerged from the crowd, one that he'd not expected to see. One from his past. How would this presence test all he had prepared? Peter's breath caught in his throat as he recognized the face emerging from the crowd. Daniel, his childhood friend, stood there, a mix of disbelief and curiosity etched across his features. Memories rushed back, memories of laughter, shared dreams, and an unspoken rivalry that had fizzled out with time. Would this reunion derail his moment, dragging him back into self-doubt? Each step Daniel took forward was like a hammer striking against Peter's resolve. This was no casual encounter, it felt like an emotional grenade pinching painfully in his gut. The last time they had spoken, it was a volatile fracture of ambition and jealousy. Daniel was everything Peter had tried to surpass, a quiet genius whose confidence and charm had often cast a shadow over him. Now, that shadow loomed large again. Peter shifted his weight, questioning his footing on the stage, a small island surrounded by swirling seas of history and expectation. Daniel had once called him the communicator, but Peter felt stripped of that title beneath those familiar eyes, engulfed by the fear of judgment. Had all of his growth, all his careful planning, simply masked an unresolved vulnerability that Daniel could exploit, but in the quiet hum of the crowd's applause and Mr. James' powerful farewell, Peter recalled the lion, resilience and strength. What if this was not the reckoning he feared but a chance for redemption? The thought stirred up stirring currents of courage within him. Notwithstanding the surface of inner turmoil, forcing a breath, he centered himself. His purpose transcended personal conflict. It was about opening a dialogue about authenticity and shared struggles. What could Daniel offer to the conversation? He resolved to approach this reunion as an opportunity rather than a setback. Daniel. The name rolled off his tongue with a weight he hadn't expected to bear. The room stilled, every gaze now flitting back and forth between the two men. The challenge of facing his past seeped into the atmosphere charged with excitement, laughter overshadowing uncertainty. Would he step confidently into it, or retreat? Peter, Daniel replied, his voice steady, though Peter could see the flicker of past judgment skimming just beneath the surface of his facade. I didn't expect to see you here. We all come together for our own reasons, right? Peter pushed through the awkwardness, tapping into the larger narrative. Looking out into the audience, he could see a swarm of curious faces waiting, wanting not just to hear him but to feel connected to something real. Daniel looked over Peter's shoulder, gesturing toward the assemblage. You've really got them excited. And just like that, the tension cracked under the promise of camaraderie. If he could stand with Daniel, both as individuals who had transformed in their separate journeys, he could find clarity. Peter felt his heart calm, the noise inside turning into a focused melody of purpose. Have you ever thought about how far we've both come? Peter pressed on, initiating the dialogue he had craved, clawing through past insecurities. We were different people, and yet, here we are. Daniel nodded slowly, and for the first time in years, their eyes met in a way that felt genuinely open, neither querulous nor reproachful. Yeah, I've thought about it, Daniel said. But it's always been hard to reconcile who we were with who we've become. Peter, emboldened, confronted the old wounds. Then let us not reconcile fear with nostalgia. Let us redefine it. We all have scars. They are part of the story we carry forward. As he spoke, Peter realized his voice carried the potential to shape not only his own narrative but Daniel's as well. And perhaps together they could ignite reflections within the audience, magnifying lessons like echoing waves into the future. He stepped forward again, channeling energy he hadn't known he possessed. If we are going to share our stories today, let them be honest. Let us expose our vulnerabilities as the true strength they represent. The crowd responded with rising excitement, but Daniel's expression remained inscrutable, a flicker of reluctance hobbled by intrigue. Are you ready to join me? Peter asked, extending an invitation, a share of power he had never before dared to vocalize. Would Daniel breach the gap or step back into the shadows? In this pivotal moment, Peter understood the essence of transformation was not merely personal triumph but also the strength to ignite conversation around connection and growth. With each heartbeat, Peter could feel it, a tightening of resolve mixed with anticipation. Would their shared past shatter or fortify them as they stood on the brink of something profound? But before Daniel could respond, a familiar figure emerged from behind him, a teacher whose presence conjured memories of mentorship, guidance, and choices long forgotten. What did their appearance signify in this charged moment? The direction of Peter's journey seemed poised to take another unexpected turn. Days passed since the assembly where Peter had stood before the students, and yet he felt as though the moment had carved a permanent space in his heart. Embraced by the warmth of brave vulnerability, he had shared his story with a newfound courage that resonated far deeper than the echo of applause. He had stood in unison with a man whose tale paralleled his own, a celebration of resilience amidst challenges. Now, the walls of Lincoln High had shifted. Students approached him in the corridors, eyes sparkling with interest and understanding. They looked at the janitor, Mr. James, not just as a familiar face, but as a symbol of strength threading through their own lives. Peter felt an unmistakable transformation coursing through him. It was more than personal, it was collective, palpable in the way he was greeted by the very students he had once deemed unapproachable. As he mopped the hallways that day, a sense of fulfillment surged within. The repetitive movements of his mop no longer felt like a buried existence but an act of pride, far removed from the shadows of sorrow it had once embodied. Life, once heavy with grief, transformed as it vibrated with connection. There was dialogue now, students asking him questions, sharing their experiences, opening the door to stories and struggles that had remained silent for too long. Emma watched her father with a mixture of admiration and newfound respect. Gone was the shadow of her father's past preoccupations, he had become an embodiment of authenticity. She caught him smiling at various students, an ease in his stance that showed how deeply the experience of sharing his journey had unfolded layers of warmth. "Dad, can we talk about doing that again?" Emma asked, her voice filled with enthusiasm. "I think the kids really appreciated hearing you. What if we organized something more? Your story could help so many." Peter nodded, reflecting on her words. "You mean a workshop?" "Exactly. A safe space to share and learn," she replied with fervor. "You could guide them through their own expressions, teach them how to harness their experiences." The idea settled in Peter's mind like a seed taking root. He began visualizing the possibilities, creating a platform for students to connect through their stories, to shape their narratives as tools for empowerment rather than anchors of despair. This was not just about him anymore, it was about creating a legacy that could outlive his fear. A couple of weeks later, Peter stood in front of a group of students, all eager and ready. The workshop had come together beautifully, as Emma had facilitated connections, bringing her peers to engage. They were excited, ready to explore their vulnerabilities through art, writing, and discussion. Peter took a deep breath, recalling the hesitations he had faced before stepping into his own light. "I know this might feel daunting," he began, his voice steady. "But remember, every story carries power. Not just your struggles but your triumphs, too." During subsequent sessions, students shared personal stories that tugged at the heart, narratives of loss, rejection, and aspirations woven with authenticity and hope. As each individual poured out their words, Peter saw the healing that occurred, a room filled with raw emotions transforming into a sanctuary, a collective rebound from pain that created overarching connections among them. He felt an overwhelming sense of pride as he educated them on framing their experiences, turning utterly dark moments into colorful tapestries of resilience. Each session helped forge a bridge, not just for them to connect with one another, but a path for their own personal growth. They were reclaiming their lives in ways he hadn't thought possible. The final workshop featured a showcase where students bravely presented their artistic expressions to peers and families, stories born from their struggles and shared experiences of growth. Peter watched from the sidelines, emotion welling in his throat as he recognized profound changes within them. As the last student completed their presentation, the applause felt like a wave crashing upon the shore, full of life and vibrancy. One by one, they approached Peter, sharing gratitude for his influence, for being the catalyst of transformation they had sought. Emma squeezed his hand, her face illuminated with joy as she smiled up at him. "You did this, Dad," she declared, pride radiating. "Look how far you've both come." Peter felt a lump in his throat, the weight of their journey intertwining with the challenges they had faced. This was more than redemption. It was a full-circle moment that spanned the expanse of reconnection with not only his daughter but with himself. He had embraced the inked memories of his past, wearing them as a badge of honor, a symbol that he could indeed rise anew. Deciding to step forward to address the group, Peter summoned the courage he had gleaned through vulnerability. "Thank you all for sharing tonight. Know that these stories belong to all of us. You hold an undeniable power to make change not only for yourselves but for those who feel unheard. Ink your tales with pride, for the world needs your cries of resilience." And as he concluded, Peter knew he had stepped into a role of not just a facilitator of healing but a resilient figure capable of light, the embodiment of a phoenix reclaimed. The tattoo on his neck, a vivid reminder, had transformed no longer just a mark of survival, but a celebration of rebirth, connection, and triumph over adversity. This was the moment where Peter stepped into solid confidence, recognized competence, and established a position as a beacon of hope not just for himself, but for those he inspired. Now was the time for you to allow these stories into your heart. Ensure you don't miss an ounce of this journey. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm and keep the light shining bright. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending, and most importantly, share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share and spread the energy of resilience.